Hi, I'm Bill Culhane along with Stephen Hetzel from Bid Prime here in Austin, Texas. And Stephen, it was what, just 3 short weeks ago where you and I sat down and you took a look ahead to the year 2018 when it comes to government purchasing. And as you mentioned a few weeks ago, we knew that the Trump infrastructure plan, it was going to come at some point. Well, lo and behold, 3 short weeks later, a group of us got together here at Bid Prime and watched President Trump's State of the Union address. And based on the reports that we, like everybody else, had heard in the week leading up to the State of the Union address, we knew that U.S. infrastructure would be discussed by President Trump. And, you know, we all heard President Trump. We've got the quotes here, $1.5 trillion. It's going to be a partnership between the federal government and the state and local, along with some private involvement as well. So what are your thoughts on what President Trump had to say last night?
Well, I think the plan is a very broad overview right now. It's a general plan, so there's not a lot of detail right now. And I know that many of our clients are excited about what's to come about this plan. And it is something that has bipartisan support.
We saw the Democrats even stood up and applauded last night when President Trump discussed infrastructure.
Right. And I know our clients are very much in tune with this right now. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this whole series. And I think the plan could be something that, even in a smaller scale, could be something that would have a powerful impact in our industry and positive impact for our infrastructure. We're all for this.
Now, looking at what we've done here over the past week, what we tried to do, and it is so broad, when you talk about U.S. infrastructure, a lot of times you hear people make reference to roads and bridges, but as you just kind of touched upon, you're talking about rail, you're talking about airport, you're talking about the power grid, you're talking about the ports. I could go on, but the point is that when we sat down a week ago or so, we broke it into 5 categories: transportation, broadband, water being among them. So when it comes to those 5 categories that people can go to YouTube and watch our separate videos, what are you sensing when it comes to actual bids that are on the street right now for those different areas?
Well, many of our clients are asking us right now about these opportunities, about the infrastructure plan, and our answer generally is there are a lot of bids already like these out there. So, you know, one of the things that for transportation, for example, and there was a mention of toll roads, of expanding toll roads through public-private partnerships, utility relocation, updating our transit systems and expansions, especially here in Austin, but I know pretty much everybody in the metropolitan area has something to say about the local traffic. With every corridor expansion, with every single infrastructure improvement on transportation, there's a lot of background contracting work that goes into that, whether it just be permitting and, you know, compliance measures, site assessments, even eminent domain, a lot of other measures that go into that.
Movement of utilities, those kinds of things.
Right. So I mean, I see bids already in our system for that, for corridor improvements. And a lot of these are more like conceptual studies, design, planning, feasibility studies, and even for airport improvement programs. And I did see on the document that was leaked, it had regional airports on there. It's improving regional airport access and mobility. And there's a lot, with airports, there's a lot of background work. And I talked to some clients who work in airport planning, for example, and, you know, just having the flight paths and having additional runways built. There's a lot of planning and consulting work that goes behind that. Right now, we have many of these bids already in our system, but with an infrastructure plan, we would see these bids, you know, multiplied in our system, from being released by state and local governments, by the federal government, funded through an infrastructure plan. So it's something we're looking forward to.
So you mentioned that you mentioned the research that we've done in our database. You mentioned the inquiries and the excitement from our current client base and those who are evaluating the Bid Prime solution. As you know, Stephen, earlier today I visited with Barry LePatner, who is a preeminent expert in U.S. infrastructure. As a matter of fact, Barry has been reporting, writing books about the subject for decades, and he is a frequent guest on a number of mainstream media network type news shows. And one of the things that Barry has talked about is the need is now. So as you look at these requests in the Bid Prime database, Stephen, these are current projects. These are things that are going on right now.
Right. I just took whatever the leak was on the infrastructure plan, which it's still going to come out in the next week or two, and this is just the overview, the draft, and I took the 5 major points. So we just talked about transportation, broadband. We see a lot of bids for fiber optic expansions, something we've been tracking for the last 8 years since I remember. It's something that it's grown a lot, and it's still lacking in a lot of rural areas. So there are countries, I know Japan and Korea, we often look at them as an example for having their broadband situation better than ours. America's a bigger country, so there's a lot more area to cover. There's a lot more fiber to pull. It's also mentioned of 5G. Talked about 5G in the news recently. I've heard about it. Getting more access to high-speed data.
What about this, Stephen? We hear a lot when it comes to water.
Wastewater, water treatment. We've talked about it in the last year, about some of the updates that needed to take place. A lot of these bids come in the form of brownfield, redevelopment. CERCLA is kind of a buzzword for Environmental Response Compensation Liability Act. It's a common thing. A lot of this really involves updating and fixing our drinking water systems. Look at Flint, Michigan, making sure something like that doesn't happen again.
We all want clean water.
Right. And land revitalization. See just a number of bids for these. These are sometimes tend to go more environmental too. On top of water and wastewater would be power and electric. There are a lot of bids in our system right now for dams and hydropower facilities. A lot of these are service oriented that are centered around that, fixing, repairing, not necessarily building new facilities. And I don't know if this plan would actually have that in there, but there's a lot of overdue work and overdue optimization set in place for the power and electric industry.
Barry LePatner, who we visited with today, we've already mentioned that. One of the things that he stresses over and over again is the simple need for maintenance. Mm-hmm. It's not new stuff.
Right. And that's something that we do see a lot of right now. Another thing would be water resource. A lot of this is related to our waterways, the direction of water, the movement of water. And we talked about flood control, flood prevention, and the increase in projects for that. We've seen a huge increase in the last year for that. And I saw in the overview that was released that there were a number of mentions of flood control and flood prevention. So that's something that I know many Americans would agree with. We see bids right now for flood resiliency, for flood damage prevention ordinances. There are a number of bids right now in our system for that.
Stephen, many people watching the video watched the State of the Union address last night, and understanding, even though the speech was an hour and 20 minutes long, plus or minus, not everything was covered. One thing that President Trump didn't mention was the wall. However, in post-speech comments, Kirstjen Nielsen, who is the Secretary of Homeland Security, mentioned that border security and the wall are a go. What else didn't come up during the speech that you expect as we go through 2018 the plan will include those areas?
And I still expect the wall to pivot into some sort of drone or autonomous technology at some point. But that is part of the infrastructure too. Also, there wasn't much talk about critical infrastructure, and of course this is just the draft, so this could be added later. We could see this in another week or two, and maybe we'll be talking about it in a few weeks and talking about this being in the plan. The critical infrastructure is something that is in drastic need of being updated, and especially in our power plants, our water facilities, our utilities, that also the grid. And there wasn't much talk about the power grid. We hear about all the threats of BNP attacks, and I've heard calls for a decade or two about just the vulnerabilities in the system and the power grid, which are noted. And I'm hoping that actually comes through. I'm sure it would, especially with Trump's emphasis on defense. Maybe it's part of a different plan. Renewable energy, didn't see a lot of mention of that yet.
Green infrastructure are words that I hear repeatedly.
Right. Yeah, I didn't see that much, but we might see it. Vehicle charging stations, EVSE, and even ITS. It's part of infrastructure in the long term, and many of these improvements and updates to the infrastructure, to the transportation system itself, could pave the way for ITS.
What does the acronym ITS stand for?
It would be Intelligent Transportation Systems. We have a number of clients who dabble in this, and it really still is an industry that hasn't yet reached its peak. So I expect to see something with regard to that, and I do think it is part of the infrastructure plan. If it is not in this plan, it should pave the way for some sort of plan in the near future.
All right, Stephen. Well, many Americans, many Republicans, many Democrats, regardless of which political way you lean, I predict that you and I here in the next not too distant future will be back in front of the Bid Prime camera talking about the actual plan. I know you're excited, I'm excited. Many of our clients out there are excited about the opportunities to come.
Right. We should see many more to come, and even if this plan doesn't happen, if it doesn't happen this year, it could be something for next year. It could be something we continue to talk about. It is something that Americans are generally in favor of, and also it's something we'll always see updates to our infrastructure system. We just won't see it on the grand scale of $1.5 trillion. It's a lot of money to ask for. Even just if 25% of that plan goes through, it's still a substantial increase in the amount of funding currently set aside for that industry. So it's something, even on a smaller scale, it still will have a grand impact for our clients.
As many Americans know, as we've heard from administrations for the past few decades, as I visited with Barry LePatner earlier today, we all understand that when it comes to U.S. infrastructure, we can't continue to, for lack of a better way to say it, kick the can down the road. So again, on behalf of Stephen Hetzel, I'm Bill Culhane. President Trump said it. We in the U.S. are a nation of builders, and we at Bid Prime, we're a company dedicated to providing you the bids and the intelligence to help your business grow. Please share this video. Please go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. Until next time, all the best in growing your business.